Hello everyone, Schwerpunkt 2025 Spring Backstage video today. A bit later than the usual compared to the season going on, given that I was busy saving the channel in the last weeks. Normally I would do this towards the end of May because June sounds already to summer, to be in the depth, let's say, of the mood of spring. I don't know about you, but I love those days in late May, especially when the tree leaves are so gravid green, right? And you have those beautiful storms still, however, with a fairly warm climate that technically arrived just in the last days here. I love, however, fresh weather. Telling the truth, I love thundering, stormy weather as well in many ways. So, as you know, this comes only 4 times a year. In the early days of Schwerpunkt, I did a channel update every 100 episodes, and I thought that, to give it more color, I would associate it to season, thus every 90 days or so, which also facilitates, in a sense, our here through the YouTube instrumentation, some analysis. Let's set the analytics on the last 90 days to see what went down during this time. So these episodes normally revolve around the channel stats, how the trend is going, and then we will expand on essentially what we're looking for the future to bring on Schwerpunkt, etc. They're also reflective episodes because they essentially draw a bit the sums of different aspects. Telling you the truth, I make these videos on days when I don't know, I lost time or got a headache. I'm tired or something. I don't wanna concentrate too much on the usual history video, and I can't sort of relax a bit by telling you what's going on. The last 90 days have been interesting for a set of reasons. In my case, also for personal ones, but mostly because also we experienced some interesting dynamics on Schwerpunkt that were fairly new. Essentially, I began, and this is the backstage of the backstage, because I'm not going to show you in the moment. In theory, there is going to be one day, nobody knows when, some kind of revelation about my background, etc. We're not there yet, but you also are not supposed to care that much. Honestly, the solo Schwerpunkt is exactly designed to focus on, on the beyond a bit of everything that we discuss, and very often the very core of the same. But to make the long story short, I have drastically increased my time reserves, actually just out of efficiency, technical means, other circumstances, so that I can work much better, both in my professional, so backstage but official public side, and with Schwerpunkt, which means that I can really dedicate much more care and time for to research in general. When it comes to Schwerpunkt, this specifically means that I can make more specials. There is this cycle which gives a bit like the tempo and the almost infinite supply of all kind of topics that we can't really deepen far and wide, given the basically almost infinite food that any, even apparently niche, some of you at times explicitly say, historical topic can actually provide, because we don't really cover two niche topics in the sense that what we discuss is something particularly minute, right? There is an encyclopedical intent, as you know, but the topics we cover are very often sort of fundamental, important, so they may be niche compared to what normally people watch on YouTube, but are not really niche in broader historical objective terms. This stepping up has already produced good results. in especially the quality of the videos, the script, in the image search and beyond. I will not digress too much on this topic. The last 90 days have been characterized, however, also by another dynamic that I hinted at because we had time to reflect on what happens on Schwerpunkt, generally speaking, concerning an actual drop in especially what it turns out from the actual analytics from home page views, meaning what you actually find in your feed as soon as you open YouTube, which is very interesting because my channel has, for example, not lost income, interestingly enough, but it lost proper views and watch length, even to a substantial degree. A special sort of in-depth reflection must be made on subscriptions as well, because that turns out to have also gone badly down in ways that are possibly understandable. But again, whenever you look at the stats, I have a fairly high rate of engagement in of course, my videos are longer than the average, so that may be tricky in a way, but that may not, in fact, even properly be how YouTube promotes this channel. That's a pity because, of course, Schwerpunkt is not now a completely unknown channel that nobody has heard of. There are lots of smaller channels on YouTube that really make very good content and that maybe even make, I don't know, videos with hundreds of thousands of views, but still are within my own scale of size, which is also interesting. Subscribers are not even too important in a broader sense. I mean, back in the day, they were sort of the most conventional indicator of how well your channel was faring, right? And in a sense, they empirically still are. But as I was just saying, there are some dynamics that show how, for example, for some reason, there's still a plateau of traffic that more or less yields also the same fruits in terms of revenues, for example, even though these other stats dropped and at least in the last 90 days followed this trend. It's, again, not a massive thing. When you look at it here, again, look at 1 year distance, for example, things have gone slightly down in the last month or so, especially in the say from mostly during the mid of May. Like the central weeks of May were witnessed like some downs we had not touched from quite a while really on the channel. But overall, you realize that the watch length and the views are similar, right? We even spiked actually in that infamous video about the other channels on YouTube to the highest watch length ever recorded, I think over 700 hours in a day. And if one looks at this, considering the trends we reached since the autumn of 2023, when really escalated in unprecedented ways, we're still within that range. We are on that plateau, and there is no sign of the channel to be slowing down in say on the longer term. Like ups and downs are normal. There have always been, and they're completely understandable, especially when you realize how many factors can really interfere from the external, right? Let's assume that YouTube, just saying this for the case, declines in a general sense, or it will reflect, for example, on the role of AI. There are lots of channels that apparently are loaded but still get lots of views that make now almost completely entire AI content in terms of voice, of information, of image. And for some reason, especially most of these channels are sort of trash ones, but they're starting to, so that maybe make big in the moment, but they're just channels that quickly give up, and they do not have, in fact, in the longer run much to achieve, because they make very small, short videos with no broader point. But as I was observing in that video about the main YouTube history channels, this thing is creeping in the other channels as well, right? I personally use AI just to sort of write in better English, like if I have to write a letter or even just like, I don't know, translate something in a proper way than I could do. I always double check that. I also do use like sort of the open, say AI searching for external information, but I always rigorously check that because I don't think it's really useful. And it's also, at least the type of free AI available is pretty dumb, right? You cannot write useful historical sketches, etc. I base all my work on sort of much else. And I think to be extremely lucky because I don't think that some information will necessarily be easily accessible in the future anymore. There was pretty tight control in the last decade or so on, for example, those free books download side of stuff that we all sort of abused of at some point back in the day. But say my videos are incredibly unique and, as you know, pretty long, pretty much explained by the evidence that I provide. And so I don't think AI can do much even in this field, let alone writing actual scientific articles or whatever. I'm not going to discuss this because I think we're so far not from the capacity of AI to reach like very advanced levels of complexity, but the actual possibility of such a deterministic system to simply argument or have a bias in also towards the say seeking an actual objectivity. When you ask AI about why something may be wrong in a text or whatever, they basically have a bias in what they think it may be wrong. It's not like they have a that sixth sense you may develop after decades of actual research on primary sources that maybe the AI will never even know about simply because nobody ever digitalized them, banally speaking, or maybe because the OCR reading is wrong, and so the AI understands something for something else. Nevertheless, the point I was making is that this drop is within the expectations of a change in platform, in my opinion. It seems like probably like compared to when I started the same, everything is slightly more difficult. At least I see also big channels at times with hundreds of thousands of followers getting scarce amount of views, but very scarce, not always, but still. It seems like there is a burnout of some sort, especially in terms of originality from some of them. Indeed, there are new means at disposal, again, to create fresh, new content, but let's say I opted for this podcast kind of style exactly because I don't have the time to improve the graphics, the visuals, etc. I don't care either. I think that what I'm saying is important, primarily also just to develop my own skills rather than sort of being famous or whatever. We have collected, however, this community along the years, and I obviously notice this rhythm. I, again, am aware to be part of a bigger flow, so I don't pretend these changes to be particularly relevant. Actually, when I see consistency from the side of the old day, from the side of the most loyal followers, not just even the old date ones, because people come and go, it's absolutely normal, but by this solid and often silent bulk of followers that really watches my content every day. The homepage drop here, you can start looking a bit at the stats, is something that doesn't apparently have, even though I've never really explored YouTube analytics to that level of strategic obsession, any apparent specific explanation. Say, let's put it at 90 days, etc. I just know basically we had what I was really impressed by was by last year's, especially in autumn and in winter this year as well, organic spikes that for the first time brought me up to even 8,000 views in 48 hours, something like that, all by Schwerpunkt, meaning I didn't have to sponsor, I didn't have to share anywhere, right? And the mere content in itself did that. By the way, as you know, I record a day before you're going to see the thing. Normally, at least some videos are also recorded in other times. But for example, yesterday I uploaded that video about the Indo-European Urvolk, and I see that here is making really lots of views at a time, as it was in a sense expected. You can't really fully know how far things are gonna go, because the sometimes you say, oh my god, this video is so appealing, it has this guy, it's well done, etc. Maybe people are not gonna watch it, and then maybe there is another video you think it was just a sidebar or something, and people click on it for some reason. It's not just about the thumbnail, it's a sum of different things you can't properly track. The homepage drop is something we experienced just again mostly from the end of April, starting from the end of April up to like the lowest was mid-May, May the 15th. Then we came back a bit with certain, with those couple of videos we talked. First of all, that was a very important step, I think, in the history of Schwerpunkt, that of course we're gonna take further, the series about Ukraine, which I thought really I needed to do from, especially ever since the 2022 Russian invasion started, and that sort of for personal reasons I found the reason to really carry out, which again I will not explain fundamentally what this means for me, but it was very important. We also say spikes are also the product of multiple YouTube videos of overlapping, right? For example, in the last days, having made videos that, scored a fair amount of views helped. Surely also the Indo-European video, because when you have a low phase, like you can make even the video that will explode, but if it's not sustained by some attention that is already in the air, it may lose critical momentum and not a spike, right? And things and the homepage here, YouTube calls them navigational functions, but it's fundamentally the homepage within them that drives the wall. And I see here at the beginning of the period was March the 3rd. We had navigational functions made 1,400, right? That was a moment. I remember which video I had made so much. I think it was about one of the 12th century knightly combat psychology, about breaking heads and bones. Now we got the last spike, the one about that was saying before of the YouTube 90 YouTube history channels. That stuff is only 1,300, right? And it's just like a massive spike in between. Again, the homepage views, the navigational function views getting to 400 at the lowest. So it's something so organic that you can't fully understand why that is the case. Basically, I asked here and there also to the same AI that understands something at least about the stuff, and it explained to me basically it's not the followers' fault as much as what YouTube really shows them in the homepage. And so this means that for some reason, some other content was, because the content I make remained the same otherwise, and even improved actually over time, was not really showed, was not put forward by YouTube, right? And again, I had in autumn and in winter respectively, like one month each of 2,500 views, 24 hours straight, right? So that was unprecedented for the channel. I said, okay, it's done. We can simply take off. This is going to go exactly where we want it to be. And instead, ups and downs are fine. They always exist also in between that period. But going so low from times that, again, I didn't see this like in 3 years maybe, was really impressive and especially sudden, right? There wasn't any specific organic reasons. Yes, it may have been that, I don't know, that some of the videos were not so immediately entertaining. At this point, I realize what you may like more or less. That's why I have to play a bit more strategical, especially through the so-called specials. In fact, actually, the reason, as I was saying, hinted at before, that I haven't made this backstage episode so far, is that I was trying to recuperate views with the sort of more mainstream and some also more interesting history videos that are sustaining that attention. But say, had I done this, say, in February or in September, the same kind of videos would have gotten many more views than they actually got. So it's a big question mark, because again, from the analytics, I don't think we can trace back the actual reasons of this. Again, we had also last year times meager moments, but they weren't so meager really, right? Last summer wasn't too great, but at some point things woke up, and again, we got fresh amount of views. This going down in the last 90 days was a bit too sudden and systemic for as far as I can see. And again, I can't see a specific change in my content, so it must be external reasons and factor. How can you fix that? Well, of course, watching more, subscribing, liking, etc. simply makes you more connected with Schwerpunkt through the same homepage, and that's extremely important. In fact, the actual problem that occurred the most in this last period, that however has a much longer trend, seems, okay, we'll talk about later, but it's a subscription burnout that we also have to investigate in, because it's not so immediate in understanding as well. For the rest, the other indicators here, let's not even use views, but watch length, because watch length was heavily affected by the homepage thing as well. For the rest, the other stats remained normal. In some cases, they may have even improved. It really depends. Suggested videos, playlists, YouTube search, channel page, I think they remained all pretty similar. There wasn't any particular variation over time. You can see this also on the year long thing. Probably, yeah, things go a bit down as well if the homepage again doesn't drive that. For example, the playlists were much more watched this autumn and winter. Of course, there are seasonal factors, like people staying home. I think over the years, especially the bigger the channel is, really does affect a lot the thing. I think it's obvious. In September, you always have this coming back, lots of people watching, and you, for some reason, the views booming. It was like this for a couple of years in a row. It was the case actually also, I think, in the previous years before the boom, so to say. So I don't know about this, and I'm prone to believe that it's a sum of reasons. Seasonal, probably other type of content circulating on YouTube. Consider there are also more and more people that probably are filling a bit the gaps of the niches, etc. I don't see too much hyper-specialistic content. Say that, for example, the stuff I discuss, let's be honest, I discuss them much more thoroughly and in depth than, let's say, even if one guy makes, I don't know, a very thoroughly researched and precise video about one topic, or very well laid out, etc. Like, they're not going to come back specifically on that, especially even very specialized channels tend, and even the very good ones from a historical point of view, tend to focus on what at that point really does become a niche, right? Let's say I talk about naval warfare and I research about 19th or early 20th naval warfare, and the channel is about my research about that, and I talk mostly just about that, or say very strictly technical topics. Sometimes it happens. It's not definitely the most typical YouTube channel, but in that sense, I suspected a bit less people. Maybe there is a general interest that people can be drawn into. Maybe my format may discourage that, as a matter of fact. But we definitely cover things in ways that I understand why YouTube, especially in terms of search, for example, let me check how that went, especially in terms of views, because at least, if I don't watch eventually, it's on you. But at large, it's important where this stuff comes from. YouTube search remained actually pretty much the same, right? So this is also weird and bizarre. It may be, of course, it was not ever extremely high. We're talking between 200, 300, a bit more than 300 maximum a day. It's also actually pretty good because it shows that people search and find me. But again, if YouTube were to show my actual results in the way they are more pertinent to the topic, I would come much higher. Like if you search for certain topics on YouTube, you're going to get, first of all, the bigger channels, the bigger videos, even if they are not really related to the topic. And if you actually search the very key in that explicit terminology, they don't show the actual results about that first. There have been interesting dynamics. I've created, for example, lots of other playlists. I had stopped a bit over the years because I had, there are some limits now. I'm not going to explain you on YouTube, but I have found ways at least to embrace them through those technical improvements that I was talking about before, so that I've been creating lots more playlists. I don't know how much that influences the wall, but I see that at least certain playlists are very watched. And so also older content that maybe does not get boosted by YouTube around in views, etc., is going to be watched more because of that. Maybe paradoxically, those older, less watched videos are going to be reinjected into the system of the suggested videos, etc., due to that, right? We can say that our community has consolidated importantly, but I also feel that there is that burnout towards YouTube in a general sense. I mean, when I started, my channel was really the only one to cover certain topics, and people were more hyped by the novelty, by finding the guy who had covered that particular topic that may have been sort of very important. For example, I think I was the only one together with Matt Easton to have made a video about the Merovingians in 2018. May seem strange, but so it was. And I got lots of views for years just because I was probably like the only major, say the only creator who had made a long enough video about Merovingian history, even though it wasn't even that specific. Today you can find all kind of aesthetically drawn thumbnails and crafted scripts about the Merovingians that maybe again are just for 20 minutes long videos. They do not really tell more than much, but people feel drawn by the sort of atmosphere and not by the actual historical content. YouTube has really probably failed the expectations of many, because this is a fantastic place. I think it's extremely useful. I use it especially for music, for documentaries, etc. Just like podcasts, like when I'm working, just listening to them in the background. And I know how much can be found, but at the same time, I don't think that YouTube provided with that sort of sense of wonder and stimulation that could be fundamentally based on let's find out, let's reward content that sort of makes more sense. It is less sort of junk and cheaply consumable, right? There is also probably a behavioral aspect. That is to say, people feel, and this is disturbing because it's almost a feministic trait of this, that if a channel doesn't get enough views, it's also not worth watching for some reason or another. And if you start from that, you can understand that if you are searching for entertainment to a degree, which mostly YouTube gravitates around by this point. But it's definitely not true in terms of actual knowledge. And I must say that even experts out there, so that they are all flattering. You can see on certain channels that they began making something more construed and well done, etc. And then YouTube prompted them all of a sudden to adapt to, in order to make more money at the end of the day, to the shallower, shorter format that unavoidably can't really explain people well what's the matter. And this in turn was going on many other platforms, right? The kind of Reddit analysis in general, like what kind of, do you want the cheap gossip like hearsay about whether that source is good or not, and how other people click with that, and that's basically your vibe about whatever, like dictating your life choices on that matter. That derives in turn from very serious problems in the world's education systems, in the general approach towards the internet. Again, the sense that here at some point we were rushing decades ago on it to find all the possible stuff we could imagine. Now we're bored by that, right? We don't feel like we have to hurry to actually get the thing and enriching ourselves with that. So I think that overall this is the general vibe. I feel I don't think that there is gatekeeping from the side of my subscribers, but I definitely know, because I see it also from the stats, that the sharing has not dramatically increased either. It has stopped exactly with this kind of trend we're seeing. It was actually increasing even more than views, watch length, etc. in like all the space that went from basically from autumn to winter, then following the same kind of homepage drop, right? So this tells you how dependent it is on this YouTube reminder rather than general commitment to the channel per se. I must say, however, that I see here, even at the lowest, right, something gravitating around 100 at least external views. I don't know how much this is. We can actually check further in the subsections where people find this stuff. Mostly it's Google search, as I can remember. Excuse me, I drink a little in the process. I don't know why this page is still not showing, but it has to show. Does it have super speedy medium here, but this stuff apparently can still happen. And we see Google search actually taking off, wow, from last year, much more than I thought. And I think this is probably due to the playlist. But here we see, oddly enough, that this thing went down also in the last period. Right, exactly. Sorry, there was a peak, really. I don't know how this works. It may be that people search for me. What did they search, actually? I don't think you can see a substack of that, no. So that would have been sort of, and it's not too much. It's just like, again, maximum 100. And all the other voices, all the other places where my content is shared is actually pretty scarce. So that's why I'm saying that my content is actually not that often watched. And this is over 90 days. Just, I don't know. This is even much less, actually. I was still watching the whole, it's actually pretty scarce, but really scarce, right? For example, on I understand that it's not pretty the case that people watch YouTube videos from X, but for example, I have 400 subscribers there, and I got in 90 days only 100 views from there. Again, and declining, by the way, over this period. So again, these are also relevant numbers compared to the bigger ones. And again, the homepage one was really leader. But I must say that in the last couple of weeks, I've gotten a bit more views overall, so I can't really complain about the general picture. We're, again, always on the same old plateau, right? Which we are from a couple of years, and it's completely good. I hope this is not going to get eroded over time. I can't say, however, that, again, we're going to improve the content. Again, not because of this, but because just it turned out that, I can also make better, and just the type of content, as you are probably noticing yourself, gets gradually refined over time. I didn't make this kind of videos exactly the same way, say, a couple of years ago yet, right? So we've gotten slightly more refined, etc. It's difficult to find any other topic to discuss regarding the stats, because, again, it seems like some factors remain up or even increase, others go down. So more or less we are where we are. There are fluctuations. It's always been the case on YouTube. I would really never imagine that things could simply be steady, and not, of course, the same platform to last forever, my videos to be always watched. The only thing I wanted to briefly analyze regarding this task, which may be actually the most serious one of all, is the subscription rate, right? So we have had, actually, over especially the past year, an important growth regarding especially views, watch length. I hope that this year we're going to organically spike again towards autumn, etc. So this going down in May, something that we comparatively didn't really have in the past years, quite, like, at least in the same way. There were ups and downs, but the trends were more consistent in that. It was more uniform. What I'm actually looking at here on the longer run, in the bigger picture, is the fact that our subscriptions basically started to go very high, up to more than 100 a day at some point in September 2023. Okay, maybe less, like we're talking about 60, 40, 50 a day. And at the time, there were reasons for that. We were spiking for the first time. There were people sharing a lot on other channels, and this has faded. And we have had some consistent level of subscription, like especially in 20, 30 a day for a year or so. I mean, still last summer, we had easily tens of subscribers without even needing to ask for them, even though we were actually not making so many more views or watch length than today. In the last year, I mean, from then, even we have more, say, subscriptions during the spike in September with, again, 50, 40 subscribers, things like that a day. Then things sort of remain a bit high, but not as high as the previous spikes, and at times with very few subscribers in a day, right? I think the last time subscription, say when we went negative in terms of daily subscriptions, was in the autumn 2022, something like that. For the first time in mid-May, we had it again. So after like 2 years and a half of organic subscriptions. This in part happened because I made that video about Ukraine, and the Russophiles did not like that. Imagine following me for a consistent amount of time, agreeing with everything I say, then it comes to my analysis of Ukraine, and that suddenly you don't like, you unsubscribe because, who did you think you were following, honestly? But I know that those people literally unsubscribe because they do not have any actual political or cultural historical references of why that is the case. And that's exactly the main problem. Like, for some reason, people think that, I don't know, being supportive of Ukraine has anything to do with being a liberal or a leftist. That is a mental illness, in my opinion, as much as just being a left. Because most right-wingers, so they are leftists, even if they even don't understand, of course, themselves what that even means. In any case, that was normal. We lost, I don't know, I think one day, here I can check, we lost one day 2 subscribers and one day 3. For the rest, we kept regularly getting new subscribers. One of the days before, also randomly, we got something like, how much? Like 25 or something like. So it's not much, but let's say it was organic for a long time. Previously, early on, we even reached 0, like at the beginning of May, in a day. Now we've gone into to rise again, but and this may be as well in line with the homepage thing, because it may be that less people are also showed in the homepage by YouTube, because that's what I don't know, whether this happens among my subscribers or people who would have been suggested my videos, not in the suggested videos column on the right, but from the homepage. That I don't know. I think I could even check here, but honestly, there are non-obvious, non-immediately expandable ways to find that out in any case. So it may go in parallel, and evidently I don't think it's a coincidence, right? The trend seems pretty, it actually, like the homepage views, again, were quite high, and as we looked at what they're saying, in the last year's spikes, it had lots of homepage views, and again, still over the years, this daily subscription rate went gradually down. If you see it from the long term, it's as if it had been going gradually down over the past couple of years, regardless of the fact that we really got most subscribers really throughout this entire time rather than the previous years. So this is an interesting trend, because at least apparently, because you may never know this on YouTube, the notion is that we may have essentially saturated the amount, say we may reach most of the people who would be interested in our content, right? Which on YouTube is probably easy to get, especially considering that there are, as we've seen, also many history videos. And so it's at this point, it may be that it's just, maybe people are interested in my content. They would even subscribe more than before, but they don't see me, all right? And so we have difficulties reaching them. And it's likely that, again, we're not going to reach them unless you began to, for example, that's a valuable strategy, as we did in the past. Like if you went on other channels and simply commented, why, I don't know, why don't you check Schwerpunkt that he did this thing, or, what do you think about Schwerpunkt, whatever. That's actually the best way to get views on YouTube. It may be annoying to a degree. You may even risk your channels to be taken down. I don't know. It doesn't happen that way, but if it is a normal question or something, you don't spam, everything is fine, of course. So YouTube, I've seen, is also really tolerant with also my type of content. Sometimes I got partially monetized for something about, I don't know, nationalist socialist history or something, but I required revision and they green lighted it, so it wasn't much of a problem. So this is mostly the major trend. As I always say, because I say this since the beginning, sharing is the most powerful tool that you have on the internet. Point, right? If you don't want to use it, it's fine. Just know that, of course, if you use it, it can benefit all of us, because this content is, I think, equipped with some qualities that you can't find elsewhere. And so you decide at the end of the day how worth that is, but there is just so much I can do for it. Like I can't oblige anyone to share. It's not just by asking to share that people share. So I realize that it's rather me who has to do something that has to convince people to share, right? I can't simply ask and say, okay, well, it's because people don't share that I have had this drop. At the same time, I'm fairly confident that it's easier now to reach a greater audience than before. I mean, with 27,000 subscribers, whether you have these ups and downs or things are more consistent, if I made just like yesterday's video about the Indo-Europeans, it's much easier than before to have great spikes in views, right? It's definitely that easy. Of course, you can't make videos like that every day. I noticed over time much more like sort of the psychological consequences, for example, of making, for example, a first part of a video, the same topic, and then making, for example, the second part relatively close distance, even, I don't know, a few months. People will say, oh, it's still that topic. No, we want the new thing. We want just a new thing. We want to be entertained by the new thing. And so strategically wise, I have to handle the content in that way. I very much feel that sense sometimes. Again, my historical content may not be particularly well known to others. For example, just because of my background, I may evaluate a particular historical topic because I think, oh my, this is amazing. But let's say if you've never heard of that and has not entered properly your historical horizons, it's difficult for that to have the same effect on you than it has for me. It's just things that I instinctively perceive nowadays after years of just, knowing more or less what to expect from the ensuing days relatively to a video or another. So maybe it's useless even to talk about this. I would just say more comprehensively that when you look at YouTube today, it's more about curiosities, it's more about emotionalism, it's about faces, whether real or AI, like just to say, give people this weird, which is a miserable, at least it speaks of a miserable background, a miserable condition. Let's spy on what other people think, that it's emotional, so that we can have this guilty pleasure of being behind the screen and enjoying that without others judging us about it. And this is not really a good thing. I don't know whether YouTube could ever become a good source of historical knowledge. I have been, as I told you, I will be publishing on an Italian journal, which is a very, very interesting story, because basically they contacted me and they told me, look, we like your channel and we would like to sponsor you. And this is a serious journal, military history. And they, however, they said, since we receive public funds, we can't sponsor you technically. So we can't publish an article about that properly, but we can make some smaller insert about insight, etc., about the channel. We can suggest to the readers, etc. So I wrote this piece, which frankly I wrote also not in a haste because I had all the time, but it was more like in between actual articles that I write and I submit to similar journals, by the way, in Europe and also at this point across the Atlantic. And at some point, again, we will have to open to today. And so that made me think, because that journal is serious from a historical point of view, and they got interested in my work. So aside from all sort of the vindication of those Reddit conversations, oh my God, is Schwerpunkt a real source of whatever, authentic, because authentic, according to the mentally feeble, means, real or accurate or reliable. Authentic means, if you have a piece of stuff like from 2,000 years ago, whether it's real or forgery, that's what authentic means. But apparently, among the literate vulgus, that has become some kind of equivalent to whether, again, they want to feel emotionally titillated by evaluating, qualified people's works without even having the palest idea of how to do it themselves, because they are incompetent. And that made me think again, because it's an interesting avenue. It's not the first time that I've gotten supported by different, I've been presented with different opportunities. At some point, I made private consultancy. And they also handsomely paid me, apparently just because I was sympathetic to the guy who chose me for the for the work because it was a follower of mine. Another time they called me to do something on Russian TV about the Mamluks. And apparently just because, I don't know, the person who had to find an expert about the Mamluks found one of my videos that was definitely, I'm not definitely an expert about the Mamluks, nor I was at the time, but I can't say my share of things for what they would have wanted me to do on Russian TV, except I didn't want to show my face, and so that I declined. But let's say a few scattered incidents in that regard. They asked me to write scripts for very big YouTube channel. Remember where it was Kings in Generals or others? I say no, because I don't script for others. But in general, you see what I mean when I say that it is important to share. The more you share, the more opportunities can arise, right? And I'm actually working to contact very specific people, hoping to enter a bit the traditional history debate. I'm honestly very dissatisfied with the current situation in the world nowadays for many reasons, but also and especially what conservatism is. I was so even before the tide would change with the United States, etc., and things will remain always balanced to a degree, because I believe that most conservatives are basically saying things that have nothing to do, even remotely, with right-wing tradition to begin with, or even with actual religious culture, etc. And I'm talking very famous big names that I also made some videos on Schwerpunkt in the hope at the time, in fact, to be heard in those environments as well. But let's say I see, I may just make two names to give you an example of what I'm discussing. Peterson and O'Connor, right? You cannot talk history of religion just having as a point of incredible provincial self-reference the notion of how the Bible, say the Judeo-Christian tradition, is intended in the Anglo-American world, as if nothing else existed, and literally you do not have an idea, even as a Christian, that is part of a broader tradition. And being able to literally answer traditionally specific answers that these people say that they have no clue about, they explicitly say themselves that they have no clue about. So is it possible that I know the stuff, that people listen to me, and there's no way with 27,000 subscribers and possibly, in fact, many more followers to find a way into, it's not like I want to talk necessarily to those people, but let's say to participate at some kind of higher level of reach, if anything, to this kind of debates, because it seems like people are talking in circles at this point. Right? We're not even focusing anymore. The leftists have not been defeated fully. Otherwise, what fun would there be at the end of it? But in that sense, even when you achieve this result, then how are the world issues tackled? Or what is actually particularly going better than before? It's very difficult. And people in their very narrow individual perspectives really care about a few things, which is the same reason why they don't probably even listen that much to even the same figures, but they just subscribe to them because they say, this is the conservative guy, I put him in that box. Safe discovery, maybe one specific view irritates you, and so you want to shelter every more if you don't follow it anymore, or something like that. That's a pretty miserable form of existence, we can't even call it something like that. And I think it's a huge problem, and I think that if you read tradition properly, if you learn history, especially, we know it very well in Anglo-American conservatism, not that there is a solid European continental one, but there is nothing historical. I don't know if you noticed that. History is a litmus test to prove whether whatever you say is BS or not. And that's actually one of the reasons why history is not taken in consideration, even by, again, people that normally, on the right side of the aisle would be kind of obvious. Like if you're a traditionalist, you're conservative, what is that you are actually passing down, what is that you're actually preserving, right? If you don't even know that, it's just more like some kind of temporary feeble position that you hold for just weird, weak reasons and nothing else. Why don't we make Schwerpunkt a point of reference in that regard? I mean, just imagine, I don't know, more people working in the European Union having been sort of brought up with Schwerpunkt. I say brought up in sort of figurative terms. Let's say being Schwerpunkt subscribers. What about, I don't know, having, let's say, this can extend to a great deal. I make this appeal because you understand how easy it theoretically is to go viral online, right? Getting that minimal notoriety in the moment that, however, that's all I search for. Like, I don't want to be a famous person. I want to be out there even with my face or, you know, making my life about this. But say having that steady level of, say, spread, right, that allows to sustain the same sort of culture building across like a fairly large amount of people. That I think is important. Like that would be very satisfactory, would allow me to basically work 2 jobs with this, and to not, again, that I need specifically, especially like the income or whatever, but in a sense there are 2 jobs that, as you know, go in tandem, like a double thread. So it would be beneficial for everyone involved, because at some point we will also know who I am. You will read what I publish, and I will be always publishing because that's my job. And so both on Schwerpunkt and on wherever you're going to find that, on those journals. And if I also want to write books, but in the moment it's better to write articles for reasons that I'm not, academic reasons that I'm not going to explain. I think here the opportunity is unique. I don't know whether this is the best time to do so, because again, if I always say, if I started a YouTube channel, I don't know, 5 years before, maybe at this point have solidly 100,000 subscribers, if anything, because at the time would have been easier to emerge. People would have more easily found your content and attached, gotten affectionated to it in a way that today seems ever more difficult, right? So, especially to my most loyal followers, if you can share in that intensive form, you know that this is going to be rewarding, because I'm just one of those people that won't quit. So you can utilitaristically say, okay, well, so I will always have Schwerpunkt videos. Well, who knows, actually. But and I don't mean it as a threat or as a blackmail or anything, but you may never know really what happens. I don't know it either, right? I want to continue this, of course, but again, it's the end of history illusion, But again, if this thing has more chances to actually go on and survive and develop and improve to levels that you can't imagine. I mean, having made all these videos for such a long time confirmed me a vision that hardly anybody has, summed, of course, with what I also cultivated it with, together with my work and more. So it has actually a solid potential, especially now with 27,000 subscribers. If these keep growing, they don't come close to zero, as the stat show, that really has an enormous potential. And I just simply say it that easily. There isn't much to actually debate about this. It's kind of self-evident and obvious. Really, some stats again, because I'm also in between here. Things for now, like who does watch us most from where? We often say the same exact list at every video, but it's this kind, but it's important as well. In terms of watch length, specifically, the Americans dominate with a 41.6%. I think this is very, very interesting, as always. we have the United States, and we have the UK with 6.4, and then basically everything descends, and we'll read up to the 1%, basically Germany, Canada, Australia, Finland, Italy, Poland, Sweden, Netherlands, Romania, France, Spain, Brazil. Right, then we get also, say, smaller countries that are important in this sense, but in terms of watch length, it's below 1%. But Norway, Serbia, Czechia, Croatia, Ireland, New Zealand, Greece, Portugal, India, Bulgaria, etc. But this is relative, because if we were to look in terms of watch length, a number of views which equate roughly, not necessarily to the proportional population, but we have the highest watch length for the first time, I think, that I can remember, owned by New Zealand, 25 minutes on average, with over 300 views, interestingly enough. Then we have Iceland, also very high, 22, but 83 views. Montenegro, more or less the same, with 11 views, which is, at this point, we can presume also just one person, maybe. Then we have Finland, 20 minutes. Malaysia is very interesting, something a bit less than Latvia, Croatia, Portugal, Uruguay, United States, Bulgaria, Albania, Czechia, Germany, Switzerland, Serbia, Hungary, Sweden, Norway, Canada, Romania, United Kingdom, Israel, Australia, the Netherlands, Denmark, Turkey, Spain, Poland, Ireland, Ukraine, etc. So again, we will surely, and there's really like an interesting set of informations here. For example, we have actually lots of women. The majority, of course, of viewers are men, also because YouTube is a man-dominated platform. But women watch like 10 minutes and 50 seconds on average, men 12 minutes 42. Age-wise, things are pretty evenly distributed according to normal pattern. We have more, say, we have older people watching us than, say, the younger ones, especially in terms of overall watch length. And we have, in this sense, actually a pretty substantial amount of elderly people, interestingly enough, compared to, like, say, they're not enormous, right? The major chunk is the 35 to 44 years old. This is interesting because it started mostly said from the 25 to 34. And we also have 45 to 54 being slightly above the latter, below the latter. The 55 to 64 age group makes more even than the 18 to 24, and we have 65 plus years old also being just slightly below that, and much more than the, okay, this, I don't know even why it's counted, but between the 13, 17 years old. In terms of percentage of watch length, it's pretty much sort of the same, but we have naturally the greatest level of, I think the greater visualization time overall in the populace, of course, being from the 25 to 34 and 35 to 44. The one I said before is in terms of like how much do they actually watch each, right? Which is different from the sum that can be greater. So again, women 6.1% of the watchers, interestingly enough. I'm very glad about that, but we could do better. I think in the past it was higher. And by the way, this is calculated just in the last 3 months, right? So that's normally how I count that. By the way, I always forget I should make an entire video thanking the members that actively pay for Schwerpunkt. This is really impressive to me. There are people who are willing to pay for Schwerpunkt. I mean, this is what Schwerpunkt has always been about. We have 26 of them. We have various levels, and we see those ones growing as well. At some point, I surely alienated, I don't know, somebody's sympathy or not, because they were more or less. But sometimes I don't know how it works because I've never done it myself. But I mean, it happens. They stay for a while and then they stop paying, because otherwise, you keep that connected. It pays you forever. But we're more or less always around that number. Again, I'm very impressed by those. I thank them very much. And I mostly make through the ads. So that's why I said, if you want to help Schwerpunkt, share as much as possible. But these initiatives also are quite motivating, because again, I make also this mini income out of that, which is tertiary to my resources, but fortunately enough. But it's likely destined to grow as the channel grows, if the channel grows. and so that is also useful for me. Another interesting phenomenon that I don't fully understand is that I see, maybe just in the last couple of weeks when things started going better, some coming back of views on older videos. For some reason, I don't know why. One of the advantages of having lots of subscribers is that even though they may be, again, in the moment not sharing more than much, and etc., as we've seen, is that when you look at the newer videos that get suggested automatically if you watch the channels once for a month or so, is that they actually acquire, say, robustness in views, and that's also a criterion through which YouTube will fish them back for the suggestion and therefore the algorithm, etc. So again, there is just one way to press on the accelerator. It is watching, sharing, liking, and not sharing just among your friends. It's great if you do it, whatever, but it's a true means that are quick and effective, like with big forums, large pages on our channels. That is fast, efficient, and even when creating malaise, it creates a debate, right? So all there is to do met, right? That's how many people actually found out about my channel and eventually stayed, because they realize, at least the way I work like. Now, normally in these episodes, I don't really spoiler what kind of work I'm going to make ahead, let's say for the next 90 days or as a broader strategy. But I definitely speak about what will come next, just by strategy, by the kind of say direction that we want to give to the channel. As I was saying before, I have more time for specials. As you realized, in the last 3 months, there has been slightly more contemporary warfare content. This is quite crucial to the channel for the simple reason that Schwerpunkt's purpose is to cover the entirety of warfare. It doesn't stop just to the most habitual medieval warfare, not even just to the ancient or the modern one, but we made a few videos about contemporary warfare, so to a degree we have to gap, right, that bridge between eras. This may have been also the reason why there were less views, frankly, so that, it's not just about that, but it can easily have to do with that, in a sense. Again, we'll see what happens. In my opinion, I'm very curious, again, because the trend of subscriptions is very long, so we arrived to this bounce, but we may easily go up technically. For the rest, I'm optimistic, or at least I'm positive that the channel will keep growing and that the broader point will be evident to anyone watching, let's say. The future content may be the brightest we've ever made. Why and how? So, first of all, there is much more variety, right? I'm going, especially as I said, going to fill the gaps of properly, say, shorter attention through specials, right? I'm going essentially to think what you like more. I have an unprecedented level of specials reserves at hand. Really, I even stopped counting them because we're talking more than 70 videos already prepared, at least except the recording, so that I really have to make the video, but all the scripts, the sources that I also, with the extra time, rework every once in a while to improve. Some battle videos need maps, etc., but really are already there with the images that also take their time to do. And so the cycle itself really provides with very good stuff, but in the moment I have this sort of diversification at hand, where, for example, even bigger videos can be split into or even 3 parts and propose just at certain moments, also not to bore the audience more than much. So you have actually more in-depth stuff, but we can use it as a reserve scattered for rainy days, so to say, or maybe just, again, when we need to talk about them. For example, I made a video about medieval Indian warfare. It was like 1/3 of the wall. And I realized people didn't watch that so much, probably because it's India, I'm more European based, etc. But it's actually important content. And so I said, if I make yet another video about India, I did something similar this summer. I think it was about Egypt. They're not going to watch it, right? This summer I would sort of go for it because, say, the earlier we finish it, the better it is. Today I say, well, if they're not going to react that well, I'm going to make this, the day after a video that went so well, for example. For the rest, again, the specials have also become a prominent amount of these reserves, almost a half of the cycle ones that I think I have in the numbers of like almost 50, in fact, and or even surpassing that, telling the truth. Consider that some of these are doubles as well. I mean, from the same, I can make either multiple videos or I have, maybe they are the basis for further things I have to write, scripts, sketches, etc., that can go on. So it's technically even more than that. And so I have a huge choice. The cycle follows the regular order, but the specials don't, so that they can come whenever they do, to save a bit that kind of attention span, right? I've also been working with AI for certain pictures, but you know that my AI is very specific to the actual object in question. I don't make AI simply as other channels really do, like the way the AI thinks, I don't know, a Roman legionnaire looked like. I'm actually going to make the Roman legionnaire exactly how it looked like and use all the means possible to make AI rendering it the right way, right? So actually, I'm pretty satisfied with this. By the way, there are certain topics that still haven't come, like, for example, I don't know, the Roman Polybian Legion. Some of them I'm preparing from a couple of years because they're so important. You can't just leave them to chance or to some kind of like, especially from a pictorial point of view. I said it, there aren't so many pictures of this, for example, of the Polybian army legionnaires, which is kind of weird because, you know, it's one of the most famous and important armies in the history of mankind, but somehow on the Wikimedia Commons and essentially copyright expandable for commercial use pictures, there aren't these guys. So I have to literally draw them on their own and passing them through AI filter in ways that look cool and presentable to the audience. This is, I think, pretty important in many ways. So that's the kind of work that is going on behind the scenes. You understand that I do this with different rhythms every once in a while when I have time, but still I ensure that everything gets in order. Say if I have it happens to me to prepare a battle video, for example, and still being battled myself on whether to create an actual battle map, because sometimes the battles themselves, like from the accounts, are not clear. Like we don't know where they took place. There is no official version. There aren't even maps on the internet you can draw an inspiration from, because nobody really cared. And so at that point, you say, well, okay, let's just focus on the narrative, because at the end of the day, what we're here for is to analyze the sources. And so I'm not spoiling you what is going to come up next. This is from the cycle anyway, so the things you're relatively habituated to. But those are important videos. That's what I do also in my work. But of course, on YouTube, I do it in different ways that can and will sort of be presented in different ways. Sometimes the specials are very unique in their kind. For example, I'm planning to make a video, will not say which one it is, taking the information straight from my doctoral thesis. And since it's mostly just a list of something, I can't even pass it through AI to see how good of a script can provide me, because it's not going to add extra information. But imagine you made a chapter that is 200 pages long and it's all information, and I ask to select out certain particular ones, and I have fun with AI in these attempts, because if they don't suit my very specific requirements, I'm not going to do that further. So it's an important phase of experimentation that at times I thought I could use also for more sort of empirical videos that list of tribes or things like that. But the best of my content is me thoroughly analyzing any critical information about some of the most obscure stuff, and basically it's always going to remain like that. I think that's the fun of it. That's the podcast thing. And so don't worry, nothing is actually changing in that direction. If anything, we're just gonna get better scripts, more of the information, and so everything is going to be ever more in depth, but at the same time also more comprehensive at times, so that it can be again, as I often say, like in general and in detail, in essence and in detail. This is how a proper history content should be. You should understand the whole package, so to say. Regarding specific content that I can think of in terms of especially like themes, I can't say that you have just seen yesterday I would say the most typical Indo-European one, which is really a series that I'm going to have, a pretty long series, by the way, about Indo-European symbolism, spirituality, history, literature. It's going to be very powerful, because there is still like an overarching one that's mostly traditional history that we still have to cover, and that's going to last forever. That is to say, I'm likely going to die before we cover it all, right? So it's even more in-depth, but it's not exclusively Indo-European. This thing is at least aimed at revitalizing properly that culture in its specificity, and in some aspects that can and will be seen mostly as, let's say, for what they make them unique and special in ways that are maybe provocative. Honestly, I was thinking from years at this point to make two series. That would be very controversial in some ways, and I don't know whether they're going to be monetized. More than else, I'm really more concerned about the possible backlash it could, like, if I talk about, I don't know, because the history of racism, basically, in the history of fascism, by the way, and I think those are very important topics that we don't study enough, that we don't seem to particularly care about, in the sense that they may seem too politically or ideologically driven, but as you know, in Schwerpunkt we study properly the history of it, and to a level of depth that would obviously be adequate to the gravity of the topic. So again, I had other ideas. I was studying even, for example, the traditional role of sex. I think that I made a video last summer about that, but I didn't fully feel that I was to continue on it. Say the history of sex properly, not in the lower aspects of it, but say in the higher archetypal meaning of the relation between men and women, etc. So sex not for saying, I refuse, just like I refuse to use that word for Constantinople, I refuse to use this. Instead, I can say gender for sex, like most people seem to have been trained to obey into, which is completely ridiculous. I will always call that sex. But aside from that, you understand how powerful this stuff can be. I resumed the Vietnam War series recently, and we'll go on with that. I will have to continue the US Civil War one. There's really a lot, actually, we can talk about. I have something more. As I said before, there is the War in Ukraine series. That is something I will continue. I have in mind quite a bunch of things. There is still the series on the Jubilee going on. They also have to update. We have lots of, again, initial parts of videos that we still have to complete. For example, the war on the Crimea, the one on the Crimean War. We have really a lot of interesting stuff, and so we're never going to run out of that. There is a series about Romano-Brittonic warfare that I also started, if you noticed, to complete also our habitual Roman history video. I am likely going to resume at some point, but it may not be one of the most prorompent series that I will use more often, but one I actually started now 2 years ago, and I also made several videos about the various Roman provinces, which actually was a very good one, and today I would also do much better, and that has the objective of specifically covering the entirety of of the Roman Empire, right? It's mostly history from the foundation of the provinces to, say, the time of Diocletian. I think that's a very interesting and important one that we can make. So, again, there is so much going on. We temporarily suspended the regional series for some reason, but I will resume that. The medieval regional series, more than else you remember that. And you see, there is really always a lot next to the cycle that obviously is providing you with some of the finest content just presented. Sometimes it's actually much better, in fact, much more rewarded than the specials. For example, from the cycle we got that video about the 12th century combat psychology of the knight proper that made so many views, and that was a beautiful video. It's one of the ones, the type really that I like the most properly as type of video. And so really in the past years I was suggesting that things would go towards something more esoterical, more traditional. We are in fact getting there. It's just that it's become so habitual and successfully blended with histories or history of religions, etc., also military history, that probably also from your end, and I'm sure of this, you can't distinguish exactly what all these series are. I think that part of Schwerpunkt's appeal lays exactly, in fact, in the fact that I make all these videos and they are essentially so well blended in terms of different topics that, aside from a few coincidences, maybe do not work, etc., are really fun to watch. As I said before, I don't have to make always the same, more similar content. It has always to be fresh, even though we talk already about so many things. But it really depends on what thing this is. And even though, again, some videos may appear as niche, and I still have enough views telling me that after all, this content resonates, and that it is actually varied enough, even too varied to an extent, for you to appreciate. So again, this stuff, I think, is what makes, in many ways, the channel followed, appreciated. I'm sure that we're going to surpass this lower point that is just, by the way, not that low even, if you look at it in perspective. But things could really go better, and we just have to restabilize and start building once again. It's always been like this with the channel. After all, aside from these ups and downs, you can't really ever say that it went down. It always went up, right? It always solidified, consolidated at every step of the way. So I'm very confident about Schwerpunkt really passing this phase. And summer usually is not one of the best periods of the year in terms of this kind of normal views, etc. But at the same time, it changed. It often changed. There is always this sensation that let's say the variety, every year things are different. They're just not really, just even in the positives, always the same trend, right? Always the same increase and so on. So it's really normal for things to go different directions. And I wouldn't, in fact, worry more than much in this regard either. I think it's really how it's supposed to be. Sometimes, again, you don't know really even what to say during this channel updates, because I have now a habit of talking a lot, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what I say is so interesting or convincing or whatever. More than else, these videos are supposed to show you what I'm doing, how I'm working. Honestly, and also obviously listening to your advice, but one of the things I also wanted to recover at some point, because some of you asked me, was the Filmkriege series. If you wonder why I don't do that anymore, not because I don't want to, because in theory it's still on, it's views. If I make a Filmkriege series video, I get half of the views. So either we fix that and we get more views and more views. Otherwise, I will not do it. I will keep it for myself, and I'm sorry, but that's also how the thing goes. Yes, I do bend in theory to that, but because I know that if I had continued that, it would have not necessarily been where I am now. So it would have been in the factuality of it more convenient. I would say less convenient to do that than what I have done instead. I would also talk a bit about my doctoral work again. There was a so-called PhD Tales series that also, at least in the last time, didn't really make too many views. I even recorded a video that I managed to, that I still have to publish because I have a minimum of videos that I can air even when I'm not here, when I don't record, etc. And that wasn't even that good, but I was thinking that some aspects may be too far from the audience at some point, and I realized that maybe the entire notion of PhD research, etc., was more of a thing years ago. It goes in parallel with that different approach to culture and education, even through YouTube. 10 years ago, it seemed like a big deal. Today, people don't even talk about this much anymore, right? And there is probably a demographic dynamic maybe that people exactly my age have maybe topped that at some point, and then things went down. And people are even skeptical or, suspicious of somebody who was talking about that experience, but I could paradoxically discuss this in terms like ex post, like how important it was for me to carry out the doctoral research, and why people in general should keep doing that as well. I think it's very important, right? We shouldn't underestimate the power of that work. But let's say if I talk in front of people who want, again, a typical YouTube thing, of course I'm not going to say things that are not much popular, but things that necessarily will make it appealing. Because if you say are not along that path, because I have lots of young historians who write me and say, what advice do you give me? I'm doing that, what do you suggest, whatever. But most of you aren't on that track, right? So talking about me having done the PhD and everything and explaining, it's actually very interesting. It's very interesting also from a psychological point of view, not just from a historical point of view, because it shows you how you come to learn certain things and how. Right? Why is it that these titles are still relevant, and what difference does it make? Why would talking about it on YouTube would be an important thing? Also, you hear these people bailing out of their careers, etc. It's a very interesting topic, and honestly, say I am still in between things in terms of still, like, I'm not a university professor yet, but I'm working for it. But even then, I do realize that there are huge difficulties, especially in today's world. It's not about the academia per se, it's the fact that academia changes over time. And this is definitely not a good time for anyone involved there, as in many other contexts. And so we don't know exactly, especially with AI, with lots of other issues among kids, properly how dependent they are on technology, and what the future is going to be. And I'm not one of those people who, as you know, is out there just to help others organize a communal solution that likes being out there. I don't care. I love research. That's also why I love Schwerpunkt. And everything helps really. And this path, in my view, is quite unique, and being detached a bit from it may also be good, because I'm actually not that thrilled whenever I see, let's say, I don't know, my own colleagues, right? How they work, what they do, what they say, and not for the reasons that, again, the layman may be brought to say, the anti-elite thing. It's really about, say, what you can do and you don't, right? And why also you do certain things rather than others, and understanding how actually, while actually having a much better understanding of the world than most people, you also tend to steer that towards a direction because maybe of your personal limits, right? Even in terms of bias, I think that it's important to talk about one's own path and influences and more, because that can really help why you talk about certain things. But many people take their personal back, what happens to them, in very subjective way, even when they transpose it to their work, right? I know many people that, I don't know, are politically leaning towards one side just because something happened to them in their lives. And they're wrong, because they haven't solved the issue, and they still think the world has to obey their opinion on it, while the world doesn't have to do that at all. I mean, reality doesn't, to begin with. So there are many reflections, many anecdotes, and again, I think it's important to keep talking. And I will tell you, it's not an easy time, right? It's not an easy time in general, because it feels like, again, probably we will look back at it one day and say this was not actually even that bad of a period, not necessarily because things will go dramatically worse later, which is also likely in a sense, but because after all there wasn't any, let's say, in fact, imminent collapse at hand, right? Threats, yes. Destabilizational factors, yes. But there were also in other times, I don't know, people were apparently exhausted in the 80s. Also in the later ones, before the Soviet Union collapsed, nobody even thought that would have been such a quick, especially scenario to behold. And instead, after that, the West boomed in ways that were probably also not addressing the reasons why it felt probably way less than it actually was, and also won the entire race big time. So perceptions are tricky. I try, as you know, as a historian, not to be, but even just as a person, because that's where it stands. I think that it wouldn't make sense to have personal integrity separated from a historical integrity, not just in a deontological sense, but probably because if you describe, say, history just in rhetorical, dialectical terms that do not really fit your experience, your belief, like you're doing something shady there. And so that's also what I was talking about just right now. For the rest, again, it's other series that I was noticing here about Italian lordships. We started that. I told you I'm in search of also I'm trying to do something a bit more in depth about French and German political history. We could do something about Britain in the same way. And again, for any country, in theory, I have some old videos that I had to do very few, like years before from the cycle that I stopped for some technical reason. And now we're going to actually do. So lots of interesting novelties from one side, even though Schwerpunkt remains basically always the same. New playlists, lots of new playlists indeed, and lots of new insight. When I started Schwerpunkt, especially in the first years, I had many more things to say, perhaps also because I knew less, and it seemed to me that what I wanted to say was sort of more important. Whenever I make these videos now, I feel like this is a great opportunity to say whatever you want, well, in your own vision, in your own understanding. And then I make these videos. I say, well, what did I actually say? Did I actually convey what I wanted to? Like, did I succeed in objectively portraying what I want? For example, I don't know, the channel strand. Was I too? I don't know. Was I sounding too? Negative, or maybe paradoxically that can help to spur some kind of response. I don't know, right? In fact, I must say this. I've gotten. I followed some of your insight regarding making more question and answer episodes. Some went very well, above average, and I have lots of question and answers videos to make, because I get these private messages from very, very stimulating minds that, as we've seen also in the series, say very interesting things, and I'm really glad to engage with them in these discussions. I think it's very profitable because it builds even more a shared sense of community. I don't know what it feels from the other side to have someone making a video about your question. I would feel always misrepresented in some way. It happens because it's difficult. Like communication, dialogue are difficult things. But I don't know, maybe it's the fact that I think, at least by myself, that I'm a bit psychologist and that I read other people's mind. But I really learned lots of things that I hadn't guessed before making the same video, even not just before reading the question or knowing eventually what also a counter response could be from the other side. So we're getting also somewhere that I think the channel was always going towards, that is to say, a more concrete political take on European issues. And how I think, again, as I said before, that the entire media space, whether left or right, is completely misrepresenting. And that could also put us in contact with particular figures and political commentaries, etc. I don't know whether Schwerpunkt will ever go out there being interviewed by someone across the Atlantic or just around the world in a way or another. But that's honestly like where I would like to be in terms of list of notoriety for the views, for again making the channel steady. Again, not about me, my public persona, but let's say being a point of reference, because I think that I don't know any political commentarist that is also a historian, that is also a military historian, is also a historian of religions, and that can blend both things. Like imagine, I don't know, the most famous political commentarists nowadays, especially in conservative space, just do that, all right? They do not have any other particular background, apparently, that they sell in that, but they just comment on things. Imagine having that with someone that also talks to you about history proper, so does actually exemplify why certain things happen the way they do. I mean, not always, but in the present, and looking at the past in relative terms. That is something which I presume actually has a lot of potential in it. And I really like Schwerpunkt to be fundamentally about it. All right. Then it's always a big question mark. I mean, isn't life just that to begin with? I think it is. And so there is always this sense that things are not enough, that you're not doing enough, that you should put much more care in everything that you do. Not that things should be perfect, but when you start seeing all the possible avenues you can follow, you realize that your choices really impact a lot whichever further ramification of this really entails. So the way, for example, you see the videos the way they are, and how one follows the others and maybe triggers a question and answer video, or brings me to talk like this to you, etc., is continuously in becoming. Like I may plan something, but it's saying in hopefully we're going to be here in the summer backstage episode telling things that we had not foreseen and that will have gone in different ways. And we'll have made different videos that today I'm not even thinking I could make. Or maybe that I thought, but I wouldn't make in the way I thought they would. Every video every day is a bit random in that way, meaning that I prepare that, I know about the topic, I have an idea, etc. But eventually every time I make it, it's different. It's different. It's incredible. And I love it, honestly. And that's the thing that I would like to share with you more than else, that you understand why all these videos as well, because that's exactly how it feels, how it's really organized, and it tends to grow, right? So I think this is incredibly important for you to know as well, so that we can definitely strengthen this community. Again, the best service is sharing. There is really no other direction. It's also taking seriously all the videos presented, not just the ones that YouTube presents you with. Again, the playlists are very useful because you may not realize how much there is. Or, for example, you may see, you may have already watched the video, but seeing it framed within a new playlist, because naturally all my playlists at times contain also the same videos from one another, depending how I select them. But let's say it helps you, in fact, seeing them better in a specific context, in the direction that I'm presenting you, etc. So every video is that carefully crafted. Even, for example, the 90 history channels on YouTube, that was a slop video in the sense that I truly just gave you my natural, immediate feedback on these channels without even knowing them at large. But that's also to give you an idea where I come from with that. Meaning, it's the opinion that I present after all this experience on YouTube that I think is unique, right, is unique, again, from someone that also makes a very different type of content from all the others, so that can help understand how I really see things, and consequently for you also what my work is like and about, right? So I'm really convinced that there is some good in it, that this all has a positive direction, that we are heading towards, it's a bit of a bumpy road at times, it's a bit of a slow, it's a slow engine we're using, but one that gains steam over time. And so this is how YouTube works. It's not about sort of pleasing, at least in my plan, in my strategy, it's not immediately pleasing anyone, including myself, with what I do, even though we both have fun with this. But thinking also in the longer term, thinking that this is not, again, just the next video I make every day, but all the videos also that I've already done, right? They're quite actual and many. So it's a book, right? The other day I made a video about, what was it, the 30 Years' War, the beginning of the religious policy in the Habsburgic dominions and the 30 Years' War. I was just checking how much did I actually make about 30 Years' War. You have a playlist here, and here we go. Like, you have this specific type of videos that 18, like if you want to know more about the 30 Years' War, there is enough. Again, it's too few, because the topics also revolve around different things, but hey, we made it. Or, I don't know, along the same pattern, the Habsburgs. I have made 32 videos about Habsburgic history from different eras. And you can go check that out. And it's all, again, free, public. You can access it wherever you are. So I think it's an opportunity in many ways. It's one, I think, worth giving a chance to. Of course, like, were we to sometimes I make other channels, updates, announcements, whatever. So especially also in the question and answer videos, we take our time to discuss certain things. But you know that in our videos, we just have a dialogue. So these seasonal updates are not the only time we discuss. If there is any issue at hand, any topic you want me to address, it's sort of like we can find a space for that amidst the rest of the content. So it doesn't stop here. This is really an open channel as far as this interaction is concerned. For today, however, I stop it here. I just hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. As always, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.